day. My name is Emily Paez, and I am the Director of Government Affairs and Civic Engagement at Hispanic Federation. So it is great to join you all on this day today to be able to just take a deeper dive into the redistricting process in New York State. So let us begin. So overall, today we will be going over, again, the process and how it's uniquely different in the state of New York. Some of the key stakeholders within the process, including the Independent Redistricting Commission and the commissioners within that makeup. Congressional districts examples, just to give you perspective as to how congressional districts have changed throughout the state. Also, state assembly and state senate districts, and giving us a quick overview along those lines, along with city council district, and providing some kind of key information in terms of timeline and important dates as like we now see this entire process unfold. And most importantly, how to get involved, right? How can we then acclimate ourselves and get involved into the process? So, as just to kind of recap a bit, I'm sure you have heard this throughout the Redistricting Academy, but the way the process works is by making sure that every living body in the United States is counted during the decennial census. So that's step number one, making sure that, everyone, independent upon their immigrant status in this country, is counted, and that they understand their rights in terms of not utilizing the data that is collected through the census for any harmful reason other than to count every living body for the proper use of these next phases, right? And so when we count everyone in the living body, the next part is crunching all of the data and all those numbers into the reapportionment phase, which is the process where we really kind of come across understanding and knowing whether we'll keep all of our congressional representatives or if we will be losing a congressional representative. And as you probably have heard and have seen in the state of New York, unfortunately, during this phase, we did lose a congressional seat in throughout the process because of 89 people not being counted. So the margin was very, very narrow, and it's tough to bear that news when we at least in Hispanic Federation, along with other Latino organizations, have really done such due diligence and try to debunk information that was not factual, and making sure that our communities were well informed. But this was throughout the entire state of New York. While New York City performed pretty well in comparison to the last decennial census, we all fell short by 89 people. So we did lose a congressional seat through the reapportionment process. So now begins the next and kind of like very critical phase that will really impact us immediately, which is redistricting in our state. And so we will go through that next. So just giving a quick overview and summary in terms of the history of how this has happened in New York. So just to give some context and to paint this picture, in New York, we currently have 26 congressional districts, 63 state senate districts, and 150 assembly districts. So the maps that are now going to be created will be drawn by this makeup, by these this representation. And so these maps are going to be actually maps that we use not just for the next few years. We, like 2-3 years, we're going to be utilizing these maps until 2030. Can you imagine? We are in 2021 right now, what our makeup, our reality would be in the next 10 years, which is why this process is critically important. So, again, so in New York State, actually recently, the process has changed for the redistricting process, whereas prior to 2019, the New York State legislature, which is all of the voted members of the state assembly and the state senate were responsible for the redistricting process. So they would regularly go through session chapter laws and make, to enact new district maps. However, and this was done, through the Task Force for Demographic Research and Reapportionment, which their acronyms are LAT4. And so essentially, this was a task force that was composed of both legislative and non-legislative individuals. And so a series of hearings would, kind of discuss proposed maps for the legislature to ultimately vote and consider. But one of the challenges through that process, and why it probably, and the reasons why it has changed, is because there were obviously partisan support, and depending on the leadership of whether the Democrats were in the majority or the Republican Party was in the majority, it would likely favor that political party in some form of partisanship, and it wouldn't really be an independent process. And so after 2014, that process changed. So now we have what is called the Independent Redistricting Commission. And so essentially, they are 10 different members that make up the commission. So as you see on this screen right now, it shows us all of the different commissioners that were appointed. So there's a total of 10. 2 members are appointed by the Senate Majority Leader. 2 members are appointed by the Speaker of the Assembly. 2 members are appointed by the Senate Majority Leader, and 2 members are appointed by the Assembly Minority Leader. And then the 8 members who were appointed by leadership in both the minority and majority in both houses then vote on 2 independent members, meaning that they could not be tied into any political party line, to join in as part of the commission. And so this is the makeup, right? This is the 10-member makeup of the commission. And so their intention and the goal of utilizing this system is, again, to have an independent process that is not partisan. There are concerns too in terms of gridlock voting, which would mean, because there is 10 members, if there is a vote, if there are 5 and 5 votes, then it may delay the process and being able to move the agenda forward based on specific kind of task and deadlines that they're trying to meet in order to provide these maps back over to the federal level. And so with that, I just really kind of like a quick recap in terms of what the IRC, the Independent Redistricting Commission, is tasked to do. And you'll probably hear this a lot throughout the presentation. When I refer to IRC, I am simply going back to acknowledging these key players in this process in New York, which is the Independent Redistricting Commission. So a series of public hearings have already taken place by members of the Independent Redistricting Commission, and they are utilizing getting familiar with each neighborhood. Just recently, in the beginning of the year, they held kind of like a listening tour throughout the entire state of what were kind of like the key priorities for this redistricting process in each one of the counties. And so the IRC is tasked with making sure that they hold a series of different hearings throughout the state. And so they will also be publishing in drafts of the redistricting process. So they will provide maps for discussion and for ultimately a vote. So there's going to be input also in terms of, once these draft maps are put out from the community, in terms of publishing them, and then ultimately the IRC, these players will then present it to the state legislature for a vote and final approval. And so what happens after the IRC submits the map? So after this process, the IRC submits the map recommendation to the New York State Legislature, as I just mentioned. And so the governor will have to then approve or reject those maps. If it's approved, then they move forward and they're able to then send it on to the U.S. Census Bureau. But if there are any kind of rejections, then it would go back to the state legislature for a new makeup of maps, and again would go through the same process of getting the governor's approval. So on here, if the second set of recommendation maps is rejected by the state legislature, the responsibility to draw the congressional maps falls on legislators, which was initially what the IRC's intention is, to help avoid that at all means. So, but if that second set of maps is rejected, this is in the law, that then the legislator will take over. And so once those new maps are drawn, they will be sent to the governor's desk again for that final official sign off. So so a key critical player in this process, as we are already seeing, outside of the Independent Redistricting Commission, is definitely the legislators, which is all of our state senators, state assembly members, and folks who are working on this process, but certainly also the governor of the state of New York. So some of the key information in terms of dates. So there are going to be a series of public hearings that are going to be coming up from the Independent Redistricting Commission. And so we've shared these links on here. However, we will be providing this information to you all as we move along into this process. So ultimately, you should probably have this information ready to be available to you all. These are the key dates of the upcoming hearings. Again, they are broken up by county. So as you'll see here, we have starting with October 25th all the way up to November 23rd in areas from the Southern Tier region all the way to Suffolk County. So it's really important to kind of make these notes, and also noting that in order to either provide a public testimony, either written or verbal, you do need to submit and complete a form 2 days prior if you want to do the verbal into the IRC in order to be on their agenda to kind of vocalize your, I guess, key needs in your particular county or community. So the population data captured, and I think that we kind of alluded to this in terms of the overall kind of loss in New York State, the congressional seat, how we lost because of an 89 people undercount. And so just kind of reiterating that on here. So just a quick fun fact, as we kind of just dilute this a bit, New York has lost 17 congressional seats since 1950. Can you imagine 17 essential voices throughout the state that can be reflected on a congressional level? Now more than ever, we definitely want to make sure that our communities are being counted and that we are having the adequate amount of voices that are fighting for residents and of New York State. So these are some examples of congressional districts throughout the state. As we see this Congressional District 15th, which is currently represented by Congressmember Richie Torres, which is covering areas of the South Bronx. And then on the other side, we have an area in Congressional District 19 in upstate New York. And also just giving you a perspective of how districts are cut are critically important to making sure that we have candidates and elected officials that reflect the needs of our community, just making sure that like-minded constituencies are kept together so that those kind of like policy issues are being advocated by the representative. It becomes challenging when districts are broken up and are, encompassing of neighborhoods and areas that are maybe have conflicting views just in terms of overall public policy measures. Another example here is Senatorial District 13. And just seeing really, which I think is really important to see the change throughout the both redistricting process. The redistricting process that took place in 2000, after the 2000 decennial census, and then also looking over at the map over to the right, which reflects the changes after the decennial census redistricting process after the 2010 redistricting process. So as we see here, where as we're following through these black lines where it says 13, so really focusing on the 13 area here. We had areas of Jackson Heights and Corona and North Corona, and keeping those neighborhoods together, which is, definitely Latino, and also kind of Jackson Heights, which is a mix of like South Asian, but then also Jewish community and, Caucasian, etc. And now we kind of see how it has changed in the most recent redistricting process prior to the one that we're currently working on now, how then this redistricting process included new neighborhoods like Astoria Heights, and Steinway, and other parts where LaGuardia Airport is now also included into Senatorial District 13. I think all of these things are really critically important as we're going over this process to just see how the makeup of our communities are changing. So also, as we know, after the process takes place in New York State, this reapportionment and redistricting process trickles down to us on a municipal level, on a local level here in New York City. And it means that the Districting Commission then also has to go through their process directly here in New York State. So the process and how that works here in the city of New York, which is one of the biggest cities in the state, the mayor appoints 7 members to the commission, and the city council appoints 8 members, 5 of the majority by the majority and 3 by the minority. So the commission is then tasked with at least 1 resident of each borough and members of racial and language minority groups throughout the city to incorporate these practices, just making sure, as we all know, New York City is extremely diverse, and making sure that there is inclusion in the process is critically important. There is, similar to the process in the state, on a city level, an opportunity to provide public comment once the commission publishes city district map drafts. And so ultimately, the decision is then submitted for a vote. And ultimately, I believe the final player would be the mayor and the city council approval for those proposed maps. But understanding that these district maps in the city level include city council districts, they include the community boards, they include the police precincts. So all of these things are educational council districts. All of these things are a product of the redistricting phase. And so just in terms of putting things into perspective in terms of the timeline. So as we know, or actually probably allude to, but in the state of New York, the proposed maps need to be approved by the beginning of 2022. Whereas then the city then utilizes the information that was now brought and approved on a state level. And so by June 2022, the New York City mayor appoints the commission that, as we previously alluded to. These drafts are proposed around September, and this is the timeline as reflected on here. There's a public comment period throughout next year around October, and the Districting Commission submits the maps to the city councils towards the end of the year, November, and then shortly after, we will then see an approval process by the height of 2023. So, redistricting principles. So, one of the key mandates in the state of New York and also through the New York City Charter is that when the redistricting process happens, populations need to be, there needs to be equality, there needs to be minority voting strength, there needs to be preservation of political subdivisions. There also needs to be compactness and continuity. There needs to be competitiveness and preservations of community interests. And so, just to provide some examples of what these city council districts look like, and so actually not only just the city council district, but also the community board and the school districts. So again, just putting into perspective that this redistricting process, it's not only this far reach, thing. This is ultimately going to affect us very key and locally within our communities, which will determine for many parents where their children will go to, like what school zone are they attached to by virtue of this redistricting process. So it's not only your city council, then it trickles down to your community board, to your school district, as I mentioned before, your police precincts as well. All are a product of the redistricting process. So, how can you get involved into the redistricting process? So, first, there's no better way to be a messenger than to inform your neighbors and friends about this phase, to sign and create petitions. If you may not have the ability and the bandwidth to create a testimony, join like-minded conversations and organizations to create collective proposals, right? Vote on all elections. Make sure that you are actively engaged in the voting process. As we know, during the November 2nd election, there were 5 ballot questions that were voted on. One of them, according, a very key measure on the redistricting process. So it's important for us to be acclimated and to be engaged. Post this information on social media. Get engaged with those organizations that perhaps already have this information, or you yourself utilize platforms like Canva and other things and tools where you can create graphics that resonate with your community. Again, join groups and coalitions, provide testimony, and if you cannot do testimony on your own, again, working collectively with like-minded organizations. And most importantly, engage with your stakeholders. So talk to your legislators, talk to the commission members, right? Talk to everyone who is a key player in this process. So there's some homework for you all, of course. I think that we would be remiss if we can't provide you all with some good kind of hands-on tasks. So what we ask for this specific session is that you complete the New York Redistricting course assignments listed under Homework tab in the Redistricting Academy website. Email us at raacademy@hispanicfederation.org. That is RA for Redistricting Academy, RA Academy at HispanicFederation.org with any questions you might have. And thank you all again for your time and for your attention.